This is the Baymall Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, I am with Josh Bossé and Reed Dent to join Qohelet by the pond.
Indeed. We're just chilling out today. We're just feeding some ducks. Ain't that right, fellas?
I heard you're not supposed to do that.
That's true. You shouldn't actually do that. It's bad for the ducks.
I spent last weekend just sitting by the lake. Like there's my in-laws have a fire pit out by their lake, or out by the lake at their lake house, and I just can sit for untold hours. So the idea of just chilling out by the water and like seeing what comes by.
There we go.
You're more prepped for this episode than anybody, Reed.
Even though I haven't really dug into the text at all. Like I'm flying blind there, but spiritually, like if we're talking about sitting by the waters and see what comes by, like I'm with you, Josh. I'm just here to sit.
I love it.
Sit by those waters.
Well, as always, I'm going to open with a warning. But here's what I'm going to say about it. If you haven't been listening for the last 10 episodes, then you deserve what's coming to you. You know what this book is. You know what it's about. You all got to know Qohelet by now and how she runs things. It's the same old stuff. It's going to be a little funky treat. And we're getting to some really, really, I've never heard, these words ascribed to Qohelet, but honestly, some very kind of encouraging and inducing peacefulness kind of conclusions. It's really quite a beautiful chapter. I like it a lot. I hate calling things favorites, but this is a great little chapter here, and I cannot wait to dig into it. So without further ado, it's a very short chapter. We only have 10 verses here. So we're just going to do 3 little chunks. Brent, will you open us up with our first 3 verses?
Ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you may receive a return. Invest in 7 ventures. Yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie.
Oh man. Oh, there have been a lot of awful translation things, but that one just hurt my tummy. Oh my gosh, that was bad. That was really bad. Ship your grain? Oh, no. Okay.
There are 3 footnotes in that first line in the NAT. So, sender to cast, shalak.
That was NET?
No. That was NIV that I read. But the NET has 3 footnotes on that first line alone.
All right. What's the NET say? Let's hear their footnotes.
We have shalak, to send or to cast, your grain. They're saying lechem.
That's not
bread.
The word for grain. Yeah, it's the word bread.
Right.
Okay.
There are words
overseas,
for grain.
I took enough Hebrew to know that much at least.
And then overseas, they're saying the literal translation would be upon the surface of the waters.
Yeah. Yes. This is honestly, in my mind, like kind of a...
Cast your bread on the surface of the waters. I see why you called it Qohelet feeds the ducks.
Exactly.
Although, once again, we're not supposed to do that. I don't know why I'm defending the ducks.
Also just makes me think of soggy bread, and
it's gross.
That is gross.
Right. And that's actually, let's start with that image. Like what is this image? Cast your bread on the surface of the waters. And my translation says, for you will find it after many days.
Which that makes me understand why they translate it the way they do.
Yes.
Because why in the world would you want that soggy bread?
Yeah. And also, like, I think after a day, like that bread is not one piece anymore. You're not finding it.
And also why, like, there are no ducks if you're finding it after a few days.
Right. Exactly. What is the purpose of throwing this bread out and then getting it back? Yeah. It kind of feels like I don't want it. And also whatever purpose I had in sending it out, like that would kind of be undone if I just get it back and now it's soggy. Like, what's the purpose of this? So I would just like to suggest that there's some symbolic imagery at play here.
This isn't duck feeding advice, literally?
No,
That's not,
no,
okay.
It's definitely not duck feeding advice. And I also don't think it's about shipping and like shipping goods, and it's a good investment to send your grain overseas or something like that. Cast your bread on the surface of the waters, for you will find it after many days. I think what we're seeing here is Qohelet just getting real creative at this point. We are having some mixed imagery. The listeners, you there on your side of the headphones, and us over here, let's remember where we left off in the last episode with Elle teaching us all about patronage networks and this idea of using our resources to support the people around us, our community. And with that in mind, I think I even said it on that episode of because Elle took us to some places I was not expecting to go. And once it was really clear, where the arc of the chapter was taking us, I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes the beginning of the next chapter even more obvious what it's talking about. We have this idea of casting bread, just throwing your bread into the water, which seems kind of wasteful, right? You don't get to eat that bread anymore. It's going to be soggy. It's going to be gross. But if we think about giving away our resources to people, that's kind of what it's like, right? We're throwing it into the void. It's not ours anymore. We don't know what will happen to it.
That's exactly the next verse, right?
Yes, exactly. Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8. Again, it doesn't really make sense if we're talking about business ventures, but if we're talking about giving your resources away, and then instead of even giving the normal wisdom do it 3 times, even 4, here we have do it 7, even 8. This is kind of big language from Qohelet, and also very exhortative, right? This is telling us to do something. It is not often other than Qohelet telling us enjoy what you have, rest in that goodness, that's all you have. That has been the only advice she has given us this whole time. Now we're getting just out of the gate, do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the impetus in the first verse is, well, Alter translates it, in the long course of time you will find it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come, it may come back to you at some point,
right.
if you, if we're talking about generosity, right?
Is this like donating a toy to a thrift store and then you go shopping and your kid finds their toy in the store?
I guess that would be kind of weird. I see it
Qohelet, is that you?
Stocking the shelves.
But in the second verse, it's you don't know what evil will evil. How is it that the NIV rendered it?
You don't know what disaster may come upon the land.
What disaster, what evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's almost a neutral or slightly positive in the first sense of
right.
Send it out, scatter it, maybe something good will happen, it'll come back to you. But then also maybe bad things will happen.
Right.
And this is a reason. So speaking of just the things that you were alluding back to from the previous episode, if you distribute it, if you're generous with it, then there may come a time.
Yes, exactly. For such a time as this. In some ways, this is restating some of the conclusions we made last time of you need to support the people in your community with your resources. And, you will see that return. Now, whether that's you gave some food to a family in need and they're part of your community, and then, years down the road, that family's, children are now adults and they come and they bring you cookies. And in your head, you're like, wow, I, met these people by giving them food and now here they are giving food back to me. That, I think, is more the image that's being played with there. And I want to make that clear because I think what you're pointing to, Reed, is also really important. There are bad things that are going to happen and we don't know what they are. This has been such a running theme of Qohelet. You can't know, you can live a righteous life and be the wisest person and you can still have the worst thing possible happen to you. So I think that in light of verse 1, the kind of negative tinge in verse 2 of you don't know what evil is going to happen, we could take it as diversify your portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Give it away to lots of people because the one person you invested everything in, you don't know where they're going. So why not just give it away to lots of people and don't, try and concentrate it in one place. And I think that is important to understand in the context of community, because this is not about investment and return on investment. This is about maybe the reality of when you plant seeds, which is a image that we'll see later on here. When you give your material resources to your community, we all hope that that comes to something, right? Like you give food, you give money to support people, and you hope something will happen.
You know, Brent, I hate to keep bringing it back, but you know who this reminds me of?
Oh, no.
Yeah, you know.
Go ahead.
It's a Wonderful Life. It's George Bailey.
I was hoping it was going to be something else.
No, but in the sense that, like, he's not doing it because it's an investment, right? But it's, like you said, Josh, it's the idea of, like, well, if you are just generous to people, there's like an element of trust even that like somewhere maybe that there is more of a generous spirit like out there than a more cynical or skeptical point of view might be willing to believe in, you know, like scatter it widely and like maybe not as a paying you back, but just because, you know, people will also be kind in turn or generous in turn if the evil falls upon you, if the disaster comes upon you. That's how I hear it.
You're changing a generation with that episode, Reed. I keep hearing from people who are like, I hate that movie. I wasn't going to listen to the episode, but for some reason I did anyway. And you won me over.
All 8 people who have listened to that one.
Yeah.
I have to recuse myself of that.
Just one.
All right, this cannot become movie chat, or we know that this episode will be 3 hours long. So that happens after the recording stops. Okay, so we have this image of generosity and, you know, Qohelet doubling down on this, even like getting kind of exponential with it, right? The 7, even 8, like that's a big number. But like I said before, you know, that's kind of like just following the thought process of Qohelet and what she's been talking about before this. There's still a lot of questions about these images. Like when we think about these images, are there anything that comes to mind? And maybe specifically if we look at this as composite imagery. So we have casting your bread on the surface of the water. So we've kind of explained like what casting your bread means, right? It's like giving away your resources. That makes sense. Couldn't she just have said, cast your bread on the ground, cast your bread into the sky? Like, why the surface of the waters? And does that image allude to anything in your mind?
I mean, it's got to be creation, right?
Yeah.
Creation story.
Right. God's spirit hovering over the surface of the waters. Interesting. Now, you know, for those who have devoted themselves to actually listening through my Mishkan series, we might also remember that there is kind of even another layer in here between bread and surface, as in the bread of surfaces in the Mishkan. And so there might be a number of allusions we could pull out of that, but I'll leave that digging for the truly zealous. But yes, we have a creation image here. And then in verse 2, if we're thinking creation images, what else might pop out to us?
Oh, the numbers.
Yeah, we got a 7.
Yeah.
Booyah. Or even to 8. Wow. This is Qohelet talking about creation, but also something that might even surpass creation. And let's remember here, in the kind of, I would say, the cosmic logic of Qohelet, where are we looking? Where is our lens focused? She's bounded it very tightly. I usually talk about this in the opening warning, which I refuse to do this time. We're looking at everything under the sun, right? Everything that's just on the human side of the business. By bringing in the 7, even 8, like Qohelet is kind of letting herself like maybe even go beyond her own like comfort zone or the lens that she's been looking through. Like there is kind of a pulling away of the mask, I think, in this chapter where we are now talking about something that might even exceed the created order. And that's a pretty powerful thing for Qohelet to even just insinuate. That, I think, is, just really important to see. And in fact, we're going to have a lot of we really need to pay attention to the imagery throughout this chapter. But this is where it starts. We're talking about the power of generosity, but not just any generosity. Like Elle laid it out really well. Like we're talking about patronage networks. This is something that's like quasi-familial. This is a huge part of the fabric of society in the context in which this was written. And on top of that, this isn't just, generosity in any old sense, but specifically extending patronage this idea that's built into the Hebrew word for grace, which again, that should probably mean something to us. But it's this idea of being like, yeah, I'll take care of you. I'll support you. Like when I think of patronage networks, the first thing that came to my mind was, old systems of like how artists made their living, where there was a rich patron who would say like, yeah, I'll pay all your bills. You just make that great art. And, that'll be how we do things. Cause, on your own, making these paintings that take a bunch of nice materials and a lot of time. And then, what are you going to do? You're going to sell it to someone. And that takes time. Like, how are you actually going to make money? You're kind of caught in this lurch. I'll just take care of you. That is the image we have here. And Qohelet is creating this image of just like throwing it, and also throwing it in ways that might seem to be fruitless. Like, take care of the people in your community, even if it just seems like all you'll have at the end of it is soggy bread. Like, still do that. And not just do that times 7 or even 8. Like, that is, this is like kind of a big explosive, like I just really feel like Qohelet is desperately trying to move us right now.
That makes sense. And what strikes me is some of the other images in the first few verses that Brent read, and then these actually go on to the next section too. But, the clouds, if they fill, they'll empty out rain on the earth, which is a truism, right? Like, yeah. Of course, that's what happens. If a tree falls, there it lies, Mm-hmm. And it seems like there is this recognition of there's an inevitability of things happen, basically, and maybe even evil things or disastrous things happen.
Right.
This is just the way, and you can't do anything about that. There's a real cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Cloud fills up, it rains, of course. The tree is felled, there it lies. But Qohelet seems to say that in response to the inevitability of things and the uncontrollable nature of that inevitability, what you ought to do is lean into, I love the sending out or the scattering. It's almost like a haphazardness, like,
yeah,
wherever it's going to end up lying. Like, I'm reminded a little bit of Jesus in the story of the sower, right? He's just kind of throwing it, and maybe it's here and maybe it's there, and give to 7, even to 8. And so the word is lean into that kind of almost frivolous, like, generosity, rather than, because, there's very commonly, it's well known, like the opposite reaction to bad things could happen. Nature takes an uncontrollable course, and it doesn't really care about what your experience is. And so you've got to like turn inward, and you've got to make sure that you are, it's like the idea of like the prepper, where it's like, have your underground vault stocked with everything that you and your family could need for 1,000 years. And Qohelet's like, yeah, you don't know, just scatter it, and maybe
right.
It'll come back to you. Like, yeah, bad things are going to happen. Go ahead and just like, it's like the patronage, practice the patronage, like just go for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I was looking at this. That's perfect. And I think that is so important, especially in our culture and in our like, especially when it comes to money and resources, and like the way we've turned this idea of stewardship into kind of almost like an excuse to have that, like, well, we just always got to play it safe. We can't ever, especially institutionally, we can't be generous in ways that might not be worth it or something like that. It is something that, because you don't know what could happen, like, use up that money. It's not going to do you any good when you're dead, like,
right?
And you don't know. Maybe you have a son, and you're like, this is going to be my heir. I'm going to give him the finest education and the best meals, and everything. And then one day a horse steps on him. Okay, like, that's just like you said with the cloud giving rain and the tree falling. Mm-hmm. It's like, yep, there it is. Like, that just happened, and because that's real, just spread it around everywhere. You truly don't know what will happen. And what I love about verse 3, kind of like what you were saying, Reed, like verse 1 is very positive, right? Like, just, hey, be generous. And then it's like, be generous because bad things could happen. And I love that as like an argument for being more generous. Again, very countercultural to us, especially with our desire to, like, our fetishization of knowing the future and what will happen, what's next in the markets, or, this or that. And just this statement in verse 3, like, yeah, if the clouds got water, it's going to fall, it's going to go somewhere. And that's just where it's going to land, right? The rain falls on the just and the unjust, it says elsewhere. And the same thing, a tree could fall this way or this way, but whichever way it falls, that's the way it fell. There is an inevitability, and there is a limit to how much we can negotiate what happens. I think that's really what it comes down to. There is a hard limit on what we can do to negotiate with life. And if we insist on being in control, then we are going to be leaning in further and further to the fruitlessness, the havel, the mere breath of it all. And this way that Qohelet is pointing out is the opposite of that. It's surrender. It's saying, okay, I don't know what will happen, so I want to make sure that everyone gets a little bit, because who knows, maybe a plague comes through and wipes us all out except for that one person in the corner that no one really paid attention to, and he had average grades and he wasn't anything special, and yada, yada, yada. Like, but then that person becomes the most important person. Like, you just don't know. So just give it to everyone. Why not?
Yeah, so again, this is not... Maybe one of them will strike it rich and they'll become a millionaire and they'll be able to scratch your back. So...
Right.
Invest, diversify your portfolio, because it's not that.
Yeah. And this is kind of the logic too with like having children at that time, right? Like, having a child was dangerous in terms of like the actual birthing process. A lot of women died giving birth, but that did not make people say, okay, so just have your one kid and then be done. It was like, have a big family, because all sorts of things can happen. Like, you don't know. So, have more. And that, obviously, this is not me saying that this is talking about having lots of children, but in the same way that people back then didn't look at that math and say, okay, therefore we should have as few children as possible. They knew, like, nope, this is something that, we need to do to continue on and to grow and to prosper. And I think that sometimes we lose that in our world, where we often have so much apparent control and choice and whatnot. But setting that aside, the one thing I want to note is that there is kind of an emotional arc here where, we have something very positive. Then we have this mention of evil occurring on the earth. And then in verse 3, these images of rain pouring out on the earth and a tree falling down. Like, what are those images, right? Like you said, these are truisms. And when it comes to truisms, like, you could say this a bajillion different ways, right? You're like, oh, the apple, wherever the apple falls, that's where it fell. Like, you could say this 100 different ways. Why these images? Do they bring anything to mind, first of all?
I mean, the cloud, I see it in your notes here, but I also thought this, as the Israelites were journeying in the Exodus, the cloud would come to rest and it would cover them, and then it would lift up and then they would move.
Yeah, and in fact, this specific word for cloud is used to talk about God's presence. But the first thing I'm thinking of, especially thinking about evil happening on the earth, is the flood, right? And the word for rain here is the word that's used for the floodwaters coming from the sky. And again, similarly with the tree falling, this one took a little bit more time to find. But in Ezekiel 31, it uses the image of a tree falling to talk about Assyria's downfall, as the prophet warns the Pharaoh of, being careful not to be too arrogant in his own right, lest he see the same fate of the Assyrians. So these can both be seen as images of judgment. And that, I think, is, it follows from verse 2 really well. Like, something bad might happen, so make sure as many people as possible have a little bit of the stuff, a little bit of the bread, make sure you're taking care of everyone. But I also wonder if there are supposed to be kind of two levels to it. Certainly the rabbinic conversation actually sees this as a very positive verse. When they talk about the tree falling north or south, they see that image as of where a righteous person decides to settle down, and not being about some giant tree toppling over, but of wherever there's some cool righteous person, whatever community he's going to be a part of, is going to be great. Wherever she settles down and starts teaching, people are going to learn and grow in their relationship with God. And so just wherever that person happens to be, there's going to be a blessing there. Not because that place is special, just that's where they settle down. And in the same way, spread out your resources that way. And as you were pointing out, Brent, that image of the cloud is that specific word for cloud is specifically used to talk about the cloud covering over God's presence. And when it talks about the clouds being full there, it's I wonder if there is also a sense of it being God's presence. Again, there is a kind of double-sidedness to these images. And I don't know for certain that was intentional, but I wonder. And it to me, it makes sense that this can work both ways, like that kind of, I don't want to say duality, but I guess that fits here. Like the duality of like, you don't know what you're going to get. It could go really good. It could also go really bad. It could be because you deserved it or not. Like that fits in with Qohelet's kind of understanding of the world, I think, rather well. But anyway, other thoughts on this?
I did not deserve the attribution for the cloud statement. That was Reed. But I will make a comment about the trees.
Oh.
For some reason, Instagram likes to show me videos of people falling trees. And I don't really know why, because it's not that interesting to me. But the way it goes, some of the videos are like some guy who's like, they got this huge tree and there's a house right here and there's a fence right here and there's all this stuff. And they just like, they drop it in the perfect spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times it's like, they got this big wide open field, but then a house on one side, and like they could drop it almost anywhere and it would be fine. And it goes exactly where they don't want it to go, right through the middle of the house. And so there is that sort of sense of like, okay, well, once it's down, it's down. Like you can't really change where it fell.
Yes.
But is this verse talking about that sort of intentionality? Because you're talking about a wise person settling somewhere. Like, is there intentionality to where they're settling? Or are they just kind of like, is it more a sense of like wandering around and then they find a spot that kind of feels right and they just settle there? And it's like, well, now we're settled. Like, how much intentionality is there to this tree falling?
Yeah, this is, again, based on rabbinic commentary, specifically Rashi. And this is looking at both the rain. This is what I was saying of like, you could see the connections between this and judgment, but the rabbi, specifically Rashi here, interprets this in a positive way. Clouds giving rain, that is generally a positive thing. And this word for rain is also like, it's used sometimes to talk about the normal rains. It doesn't have to be like some, heavy rain of judgment or anything. But specifically on the phrase, if a tree falls, they're talking about it in the same way of like chance. Like a tree is falling. Like, I mean, in this case, it doesn't even talk about people felling it intentionally. This would just be a big old tree that's dead now and it's falling over, and who knows where it's going to land. The same way where like, a righteous person who's moving into the area or whatnot, like who knows why they are being forced to travel and relocate.
Okay. From an outsider's perspective, you don't know where that person's going to end up.
Exactly. And the benefit is going to fall there because that's where it fell. The same as,
right.
Where the rain falls, that's where the water is. You can't negotiate with that. You can't wiggle that around at all. Like it is what it is. And that's where, we kind of get back to this tautology.
So I'm thinking about other images of people as trees, that you were alluding to. You get the oaks of righteousness thing.
Oh yeah,
which I think is in Isaiah, and then there's like the Psalms thing about the one who meditates on the law of the Lord. Right, is like a tree planted by a stream.
Yes.
In those cases, there is this sense of like God plants this tree like this. This is how it's supposed to be, and I almost hear here. And again, the haphazardness of like the tree could fall any way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like with the rabbinic conversation you're bringing in, this reassurance that is in line with the first few verses we've already talked about, I think, that's like, it's not for nothing. Like if you are planted as an oak of righteousness and then you fall, right? If there is something happens and the tree suddenly is on its side instead of standing upright, and you might want to say, well, this isn't how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Yes. I hear Qohelet saying, but yeah, like in the rabbinic conversation surrounding it that you're bringing up is like, yeah, the tree could fall, but wherever it falls, there it is. Like you're still there. You as an oak of righteousness, or as a tree that has been planted and grown by wisdom and meditating on the law of the Lord. Like if you are those things, even if the tree falls, it's not for nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, again, I feel like in this chapter particularly, like Qohelet is very loose with her imagery, right? Like I think we see the same thing with the casting the bread on the waters, where it's like, okay, we have the casting the bread and then we have the creation image, and it's a little messier. And I mean, Qohelet is not one to be super traditional in any means. She, doesn't fit in well with wisdom literature. And here again, with these, we see these kind of even looser kind of slapped together images. And I think it feels like it accompanies this loosening in her own heart, maybe, as we're talking about these things. And so genuinely, I think the nuance in these images is, if anything, probably to expand it to be talking about both negative outcomes and positive outcomes. Like, you could end up investing in the kid who, turns into the president of the United States, and now you've got the presidency here, and you never even knew that would happen. Or it could, just as easily be, like I talked about before, the evil plague sweeps through your village, and the one kid that,
gets kicked by a horse.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't know what's going to happen. It could be good. It could be bad. You could have the next, Abraham Joshua Heschel move in downstairs from you, and all of a sudden, like, your life is totally turned around in the best way possible. You just can't know. And so again, going back to it though, the point Qohelet is making is that in either case, obviously, if good things happen, awesome, party on, generosity flowing. But even when we have bad things happen, the tree falls through the middle of the house, you still have to live in that reality, and that posture of generosity still makes sense. And this isn't you need to keep giving even when you don't got any money left in the bank, and the widow and the 2 coins, and you just, you show God how much you love him by how much you give. This is about actually supporting your community with what you actually have. And that is also a reciprocal process. If you are no longer in a position where, say, you have a house, then, that's a point where it turns around and you need to ask your community for help. And by golly, I think if you are a person who's been generous, that'll also be a much easier ask. But also, you'll have a community that itself was more supported, and there will be more to go around. Both on the kind of cynically practical level, but also in a spiritual level, it just plain makes sense. And I want us to be clear here, because this is the argument Qohelet is making. Just be generous. Whatever you have, like she's been saying since the beginning, appreciate it. But in terms of what to make of your life, this is how you are supposed to steward these resources, giving them away freely to support your community in ways that matter. That's not an easy thing to define, and here we're slipping into our Western mode of trying to define it and figure out exactly what we're supposed to do with this. But I think that the general principle paints itself pretty well here. Okay, verse 4 through 6. We got some new images popping out.
Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind, or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let your hands not be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well.
So, a new set of images, and we kind of have ourselves jumping around between, these agrarian farmer images at the beginning and end, and in the middle, we have this image of a pregnant woman, but they kind of share the theme of, fertility, for lack of a less weird word. And, well, first of all, impressions, anything jumping out, any what is Qohelet doing with these images? Anything? Any questions?
I mean, this sounds a lot like the episode that I did with you.
I know, right?
Earlier in chapter 3.
Yeah.
Where the verse is we talked for quite a long time about what does it mean, that sense of putting eternity into, the hearts of men, but they cannot fathom, but it has fixed it so that we cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I mean, this is not a word-for-word copy of that, but it sounds very close.
Yes, and I love that you zoomed in on that, because I think the opening image is really perfect for that, right? We have this guy who's a farmer, and he's paying attention to the weather, right? Oh, where's the wind blowing? What are the clouds? Are those clouds going to bring rain? And if you're a farmer, again, kind of going back to chapter 3, right? There's a time to plant and a time to harvest, and there are seasons for those things. You don't like do, your planting based on like omens or anything that has to do with like something like weather that changes day to day to day. It's like, nope, this is the time of year to plant. Maybe, if it's a drought, you're like, okay, let's wait till we get our first rain or something like that. Like, I don't know, maybe those concerns are there. But if you're a farmer, you're working seasonally. You're not looking at day-to-day weather changes necessarily.
Right.
And the other interesting thing with that is the word there for watching the wind is that word shomer, the watchman word. So this is not just like looking. This is like, your job is to pay attention to the weather. Like someone who farms exclusively based on what the weather looks like any particular day. Like this is kind of a silly image. Like you're never actually going to be farming if you are that in the weeds or in the clouds, so to speak, of, all these shifting, ever-changing variables day to day to day. You just got to work with the rhythms of nature and, let the plants grow how they will, harvest what there is to harvest. That's how that works. And again, kind of this disorientation from those rhythms and times being drawn in parallel here, as you pointed out, to like the unfathomability of what God is actually up to, and that it is something beyond our ability to see, right? Like it is, in this case, it is the way that, and there's a lot of different ways of translating it, but I really like Alter's. He talks about the, what is it with this? As you know not the path of the life breath into the limbs within the full womb, so you do not know the deeds of God. Like it's something that is happening inside your partner's belly, and you literally can't see it. The same way, you can't literally see the wind. This, I think, is, again, going back to that theme of the unfathomability, but we are still, we have to do something with this thing we can't quite predict and master and control.
I'm just looking at what Alter translates there as life breath.
Yeah.
Is that
ruach.
Is that ruach?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is probably the same for the verse before.
Yes.
Whoever watches the ruach.
Indeed. Whoever guards the ruach. This is such a like anti-Qohelet image, right? Oh, you're shepherding the wind. This dude is trying to stand on a wall and, guard the wind. This is the ultimate fool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the plain advice seems to be like, don't obsess over things that you can't know or control. Like,
sure,
sitting there trying to watch the wind is like trying to watch the spirit being put into the womb of a woman who is with child. Like, you don't know what that is. You can't see that. And to the extent that it precludes you from actually doing the work you mentioned earlier, Josh, it's that idea that we want to control and know the future. It's a kind of divination, right? Like we want to be able to know what will happen in the future.
Yes.
And it's like divination is like the anti-faith. It's the antitrust.
Yes. Yeah.
Where dudes, I don't want to have to plant today and just trusting that the weather will be favorable for a good harvest in the fall.
Right.
I want to know for sure. And if it's not going to be good, well, I guess it kind of begs the question, well, then what will you do? Like, so you're just not going to plant at all, like.
Exactly. And this is the perfect, like, this guy's trying to figure out like the life hack for, whatever. And it's just like, no, there is no like, and this I think goes back to like, this is a huge, or at least in the context of this very small chapter, this huge chunk of it, 1/3 of it is layering these images of fertility where you have to trust in the thing that is the source of life, right? Like as a farmer, you should not be looking up, you should be looking down at your soil. Is it good soil, right? Have you like tilled it? How's that looking? Are there a bunch of weeds in it? Those might be things you consider, but regarding when, you do it now. It's the time to sow. So go out and sow. And this is where circling back in verse 6 to that farming images of, just sow your seed more. Sow it in the morning, sow it in the evening. You don't know if maybe one is better than the other. Who knows? Maybe they're both the same. Just sow more. And I love that you brought this back to chapter 3, because that was where, we talked extensively about how those questions specifically about life and death and making life and dealing with conflict and mourning your loss. Like, how do you do that in the context of exile, which again is the context of Qohelet. And it's so crazy to me that now we're here and Qohelet's like, yeah, just keep pushing for new life, just like keep sowing. And this reminds me of, I think this was in chapter 9, where there is a remez to Daniel talking about, let your clothes always be white. And that being an image of the Ancient of Days returning and judging all the empires. And Qohelet is basically saying like, hey, it's like living in Egypt and saying like, hey, you got to be ready to live as someone who's not a slave. Like you have to be able to look ahead towards something different. Yeah, I would say even just to like keep your sanity about you, but to like keep a part of yourself ready for a new creation, a new life, for God to do something new. Not in this like, the secret kind of way where it's like, oh, you won't get anything good unless you make room in your life. Like it is not, God is not a withholding God. It is not that. It is simply that we're talking here about all these things we can't control, we can't see, we can't negotiate with at all. They're just facts of life. You don't know and you can't control whether a single seed will sprout or not. And so that's why farmers throw out tons of seeds. They're not just like, all right, this will be the most perfect stock of wheat in the whole world. It's like, no, you have no idea if any individual stock of wheat is going to grow up from this particular seed. You just throw as many as you can and hope some stick. And that is the model Qohelet is putting out there for our generosity. And, in the middle of this, evoking the image of pregnancy, which one thing I want to note here is that Alter's translation nailed it dead on. The word there, it doesn't say a pregnant woman. It says a full womb, which that word full was just used in verse 3 for the clouds that are full, right? And they have rain, this, again, life-giving force, and it's going to pour out somewhere, and you can't control where it lands. The same as, you can't control what your kid's going to be like or how that's going to go. And so I think that this image of like, just as we can't control the disasters in life, like so too, we can't control the blessings and where they take us, how they change us. And I mean, I can speak from experience that like I've felt God's blessing in a lot of ways in my life. And then, when I met my wife or, when I met Marty or these things, like my life took a turn and it wasn't one that I chose. It was something that needed to happen to, stay connected to my community or to pursue, something beautiful that God had given me. And it changed me in ways that like I did not agree to or even at times necessarily want for myself. But at the same time, like those are blessings and they're good. And I think, again, this comes up against, it really rubs us the wrong way for our modern individualism, where it's like your life doesn't fully belong to you. And we talk about this a lot when it comes to like you and God, but even you and all the people around you, like if you live in a completely selfish, individualistic way like that, kind of like the image of Haman, like you don't have anyone to live in community is to be to some degree in a state of surrender and willingness to just go along with whatever happens next. That, I think, is where, like, this exhortation of Qohelet is really, like, beautiful and hopeful and also doesn't, I think this is really important for me personally, at least. It doesn't, like, look down on or despise our humanity, right? Like, this isn't blaming us for our failures or anything like that. It's just saying, like, hey, yeah, you're freaked out about this. Don't overthink it. Don't get sucked into some podcast about like the secret handshakes that will make you a millionaire. Like, just don't worry about that stuff. Those people are trying to scam you or, whatever. Certainly wasting your time. Just get out there and try. Throw your bread around. Throw the seed around. And again, this image of tossing seed, this image of fertility is, again, going back to the beginning. What are we casting around? I mean, you even said it back then when we were talking about casting the bread around, like, oh, like a farmer throwing seeds. Like, that's still the image we're talking about, spreading around our resources. What a beautiful image.
When I was first reading through this part, I was thinking about how, like, oh, we actually know a lot more about how a body is formed in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we still don't know. Like, we still can't actually predict it.
Yeah.
Just as much the weather. Like, there's so much technology. We have so many tools. We have so much more data. I think a lot of it is just a collection of data and being able to communicate that to a larger population around the world. And it's just, we have better numbers that we can put into averages.
Right.
And the averages are helpful in predicting sometimes. But there's still, like, the meteorologist spends all day, and that's part of it too. Like, you don't hear a meteorologist like, okay, I got to sign off the broadcast now and get out to the field to start planting. Like, no, there's no time for that.
Yeah.
Like, this is a full-time job, and it doesn't matter. Like, no matter how much they work at it, we still don't know the path of the wind exactly.
Yep.
We have ideas. We can kind of predict it a little bit. We can look at trends over the last few years, but any given year, any given season, any given day, we can't actually know or control it, in spite of all of the advancements we have since this was written. Like, it's still so true today.
Even when we get down to, like, and oh my goodness, I always hesitate bringing up quantum mechanics on a podcast. That feels like the most dumb thing imaginable. But on the quantum level, like, we know mathematically, like, we can't know exactly, what the position of this electron is without losing all the other data about it. If we want to know where it is, then we don't know which direction it's moving. If we want to know which direction things are moving, then we don't know exactly where it is. And to me, that, like, kind of has a perfect, Qohelet-esque, like, we know a lot more, but in knowing a lot more, we realize, like, there is a hard limit at some point to how much we can predict and know what is coming around the corner. And sometimes that means we're right or we're close to right. The weather predictions are probably better now than they've been before. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that on any given day it can't be the exact opposite of what you were told, and maybe that's a really important day. Maybe that's the day you planned your wedding and now it's, pouring rain and now the water's being cast upon your bread, There you go. Flipping it around.
Forget shepherding the wind, shepherding the cubit.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, like, in the face of all this futility, to just say, like, yeah, just be open-handed with what you have. Like, spread it around, intentionally get it out there. Because you don't, again, this image of fertility, or really, like, when we talk about fertility, we're talking about life, right? Like, fundamentally, these are images of, you don't know how life works, how new life comes into being. And again, with all this Genesis 1, specifically day 1 imagery, which we could even look at this maybe and see some other days in the I was trying to do this earlier, seeing if there was any way this could match up with Genesis 1. And I don't know, maybe there is, but you'll see soon that kind of gets thrown off. But anyway, we have all this creation imagery, and at the same time being told, but you don't know how any of it works. So do your part, right? Throw the bread around that you have. Give that to your community. It will do something. Like you were saying earlier, Reed, it's not for nothing. Even if the tree falls down, what's really funny is in the Ezekiel 31 passage, when it talks about the tree of Assyria falling down, it talks about, like, how animals will still make nests in and on it, like, just like they used to do when it was standing. Like, life still goes on. It is still, even in that vision of judgment, it's not that it's unuseful anymore. It's simply an image of, this prideful thing being brought low. And similarly, like, I think about a Job character, where, maybe you're a righteous person and something bad happens to you that you don't deserve. Even in that state, you could say, like, oh, I could have written the most important treatise on what it means to follow Jesus ever. Oh, all this wisdom lost forever because, this person died young, or, whatever, something happened and they had to give up their work, so many people that could have been great artists but weren't. And, like, it's not that there isn't any tragedy to that, but first of all, like, what they did end up doing still matters, and what they did without having done their great work, it still matters. And the thing that we're all searching for, to use Qohelet's Hebrew terminology, the yitron, the something more to life, that is out there irrespective of any one of us individually. And I think that that's what this is pointing toward, that overflowing of life, that process in and of itself is just beyond us. And if we can accept that and still be willing to participate in this unguaranteed exchange where we're just supporting other people, not looking for anything in return necessarily, just supporting each other in a mutual communal network, whatever that looks like for you. Like, that is how life is formed. We don't actually get to know the steps or have any control over it because it's in everyone's hands, not just any one person. And ultimately, it's in God's hands. We got to let it go.
It's like, to me, that is humbling, and it's reassuring at the same time. As the one who myself, there's the part of me that's like, I'm the artist that wants to put the thing out there. I remember Derek, my best friend here, when his father-in-law died. He was a preacher, a deaf preacher, actually, but he had hardbound volumes of all of his sermons from preaching every Sunday for 30 years. And after he passed, there was some time went by, and then Derek, had a fire in his backyard, and he just burned all of these volumes of his sermons. And I was like, there was a part of me at the time that was like, oh my gosh, I'm dying inside, because is somebody going to do that with my stuff someday? Like, what's going to happen? If my things don't last, what's going to happen if I don't even get the chance to like put the thing out there into the world that I think needs to happen,
Mm.
But now, as I get a little older, and also just in light of this wisdom from Qohelet and all the things that you're saying, Josh, there's like a release that's like, it's okay. What did you expect it to be in the first place? And maybe your initial expectation for what your contribution, I guess, just the way in which it will matter. Because it's not that it doesn't matter,
Right.
but maybe we misestimate. That's not the word.
Yeah. No, I think that's the exact. You don't know whether it's over or under, but you're off. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you said it. That's perfect. And I think also within that, like, one of the things I love about Qohelet is the way that it makes us aware of like the layers to which we don't know it. Like, and that's why I felt like misestimate was the best thing, because it could just be, man, your dreams for yourself were way too selfish because you actually had so much more potential that, if we flipped on God vision, it's like, oh, you actually ended up, George Bailey style, connecting to all these things because you didn't go exploring the world. Oh man, I promised I wouldn't. I promised myself I wouldn't get into it.
Brent?
But yeah, he did something. It what he did mattered, even though he didn't, get to do his dream. And there is something, kind of existentially sad about that. But at the same time, like, I think it's also interesting the way Qohelet talks about this, not in terms of like, well, God decided that was how your storyline was going to end, but more just like, again, in terms of just, hey, a tree falls down. One squirrel in the forest was like, oh, if it had just gone one more degree that way, then I would have had a sweet little setup here and there and there. And it's like, yeah, well, it fell this way. And, we can just live with that and move on. All right, Brent, go ahead and read us out here.
Light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. But let them remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. You who are young, be happy while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless.
Man. Well, that last verse, I have a couple things to say on it translation-wise, but we'll get there by the end.
We did get cast off. I don't know if that's the same word as verse 1.
Let's see. No, it is not. The word for, to cross over, to pass over, to put away. Very interesting. Well, let's just start with the obvious. Verse 7 here, where we started. We have light. Oh boy, the Genesis 1 imagery just does not stop. I forget exactly how your translation put it, Brent. It wasn't bad by any means. That the light is pleasant and it is good for the eyes to look at the sun. Now this, to me, like, there's so many things here that stick out. Like I just said, we have the creation imagery, and not only that, like, there's kind of, even if you weren't paying attention and didn't see the creation imagery before, there's like a line here that is almost an echo exactly of Genesis 1, where It says that God saw that the light was good. And here we have seeing and light, and it's good. Like, we have all those ingredients there. Like, it feels so just like right on the surface. Like, this is supposed to be such a obvious image. But I feel like underneath that, there's another thing, which is the invocation of the sun, right? Like, the sun is not, I mean, it's not, doesn't literally happen in day one. That's day 4, of course. But the connection of this, you know, seeing the light and that being pleasant, like, this whole book has been talking about all the weariness and trouble under the sun, right? And that phrase, under the sun, after reading this book for a while, has kind of become like, oh yeah, where everything sucks under the sun, where it's hard and it's hot. And boy, oh boy, do you just want to get off this crazy ride. And now to have it be like, it's nice to just look at the light. Like, oh man, what a beautiful turn of image. Especially because, you know, the word joy is used coming up here quite a few times. A lot of times in Qohelet, the phrasing that's used for joy is to see joy or to see goodness in your days. And there is something just so serene in this, like just being able to gaze on the light, being able to see the sun. Like, there is this kind of inherent wonder being vested into life in this moment that feels so like, not discordant. I wouldn't say this feels like, oh, is a different person writing this? Like, this feels like Qohelet, but this feels like a side of Qohelet we have not seen yet until this moment, right? Like, there is something so peaceful about this. Thoughts from you two?
I mean, I like the sweetness of the light.
Oh yeah, yours said that's right. I knew they used an interesting word. I had to look that word up.
Yeah, it's matok.
Yeah.
Often used to refer to honey, apparently.
Uh-huh.
And so, like, we're talking about clouds and the idea of the people being led through the wilderness to the promised land eventually.
Mm-hmm.
We have the planting and reaping of things, presumably something that they would be doing a lot of once they got to the promised land. So I feel like we have some promised land themes going on here.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, the first time the root for that word matok is used is when they throw the tree into the bitter waters, and the waters become sweet. That's one of the things. It always translates that verse as they threw in a stick or a branch, but the word there is literally just it's the word for tree. So now I'm even thinking if, like,
I love the image of
Moses just
getting a whole tree.
Yeah, him hoisting a whole tree up and splashing it in the water. But that also then makes me go back to that image of the tree falling and, like, you know, making the water sweet. Like, there's so many layers to this. Maybe the images here are not as haphazard. Like, that was the other thing that struck me. It's like, oh man, we had Genesis 1, literally 1:1. You know, we have, you know, the surface of the waters in verse 1. And then here we have light. Like, is there some really just crazy chiasm in here? Maybe. But, you know, I am not here to unveil, to shine a light on every single mystery of Qohelet. I'm just trying to chill out with Qohelet here and feed the duck, or not feed the ducks. Let's pretend that you're allowed to feed the ducks. But again, like, you know, this is Qohelet because we can't, like, have a nice moment that is too cloyingly sweet, right? It's that dark chocolate. It's got some bitter in there. However long you live, I hope every year you can find joy, but also remember that there will be days of darkness and they will be many. And that last line in verse 8, everything that is to come will be mere breath. Like, that can again sound like pretty downcast, pretty, like, hopeless, but we've been with Qohelet long enough. Like, we know that the remembrance of the darkness, like, that is not just some exercise in self-flagellation. That is also part of how we orient ourselves and know what is worth moving toward, what is worth casting our bread toward, and not, you know, just blowing it all on some dumb entrepreneurial idea. And so, like, I think the awareness that like, yeah, the thing you're building that might just get knocked over by a little gust of wind, but that's okay. Like if you're just living with that open hand, then a lot of these problems, it's not that they don't exist or they don't affect us, but just they can't have the same sway over us because we're not trying to hold on to something that we're not supposed to hold on to. And again, like this is the idea of Qohelet, of living in anticipation of a post-exilic experience, of something that is beyond the cycles of exile, and that there is something possible, whether it's going to be you and yours that attain it, like that, who can say? Who can say? And if you are so hung up on that idea that you can't throw a handful of seed because you want to make sure that it's you and the people you like who get to have it, then it's just like, you're missing the point. Like we're moving toward it, or we are able to. If you're going to try and approach that existential question with like conditions and things, like you're not going to get very far. We have here at the end kind of a little fitting, I don't know what to call it. Like verse 9 and 10 are kind of like, we go from third person to second person, right? We go from like, oh, if some guy lives a while, let him rejoice. Then in verse 9, we have, hey, rejoice, you do this. You live in this way. You follow the way of your heart and the things your eyes glance at. Like this is, again, like much more exhortative and specific instruction. And simultaneously, it's kind of like like its own little miniature, not quite poem, but maybe like slightly poetic prose on youth and what Qohelet is saying is the best thing to do when you're young. And what do we think about this advice here?
I have that line, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. So it's like don't do what I'm telling you to do carelessly.
Right.
Put some thought into it. But if your heart is leading you in a particular direction, if your eyes see a particular opportunity, don't be afraid to engage in that. Just because, I mean, this goes back to the earlier part, like be generous in lots of different places because you don't know what's going to happen. Follow the opportunities that are presented to you because you don't know what's going to happen.
Ooh, and you know what? This actually goes back around fully and kind of in our like slight commentary on It's a Wonderful Life here. I think this verse kind of bites back against George in a little way, in that it's like, you know what? It was your responsibility for choosing what to do. Just because you narrativized it being about your obligation, that's still what you chose to do. And it's not your wife's fault or Zuzu's fault. I mean, you don't have to be yelling at all these people because of what you chose to do because you felt obligated. Like, you got to own your choice. And this, I feel like, is really powerful advice because, especially, having grown up in the church and having been given all sorts of advice about how to live life, when it came to like the really big, weighty questions, most of those pieces of advice that had to do with, being a person of integrity and this and that, which, I'm not knocking it, though. Those are good things. I'm glad or at least I did my best to embody those things. I don't think I get to be the one to say whether I have been successful at that or not, but there was good advice there. But when it came to like actually knowing what to do, and you have that deer in the headlights moment of like, oh, do I swing for the fences here? Or do I like bunt and do the safe thing? Like, there is no one who can really tell you what to do in that moment. And that's why I think this verse right here is so powerful of like, hey, yeah, if your heart thinks this is the best way to go, do it. Absolutely. Like, you are going to be judged for these things. And we should note here that this is the word mishpat. This is not deen. This is not saying like you'll be judged as in like you'll be judged harshly or with any other thing. Just there will be a setting things right. Mishpat being like this word for more like discerning and straining out difficult and complicated matters. Like, at the end of the day, it will be clear what kind of person you are and what mark you've left on the world. Like, you can't You can't hide that. You can't get away with a crime forever. Like, even if you personally do and never personally see consequences for it, like it'll come out in the wash. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, live fully, but well, like you said, Brent, not carelessly, not forgetting the other 10 chapters of the book we've been reading. Like, if you've just been tuning out and now you hear, this permission to do whatever you want, you're like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. It's like, oh, all right, fine. Like, you're still allowed to live foolishly, or God lets people live evilly too. That is quite obvious. So that justice, though, like it's interesting, Qohelet's relationship with this judgment, because she does seem pretty set on this idea that like it doesn't come about in some like clockwork way, but that's her looking at like all of society and all of the outcomes and just how things work practically. This is like, advice to an individual person and saying like, yeah, follow your heart, but also realize that actions have consequences, right? Like, that's kind of the gist of it here. And I really like this image here at the end of like throwing these things away, removing, what was the word your translation used, Brent, at the beginning of verse 10?
Banish anxiety from your heart.
Banish anxiety. Ooh, I like banish there. It's a nice word. I think Elle would probably take issue with it because of the Hebrew, because it's that word chaser, which means to lack or to be missing. But yeah, anxiety is not a totally bad word. The word there is ka'as, which can mean like sadness, grief, but also anger. Like, the root idea is something that is provocative. So a lot of times it's associated with frustration. But I think anxiety is a great mirror for that, of like this thing that just, sticks like a splinter in your brain. Like, hey, just pull that out. Whatever is getting you to be overthinking this or stressing out, like, just remove that. Get that out of your heart. And the next line is even better. Take evil from your flesh, which, oh man. Again, we have to remember evil. We're talking about destruction. We're talking about, I think a lot of translations go with pain here. It is crazy that like reading a book that is so in many ways profound and has taken so many circuitous courses to get here, a lot of this advice can feel very, very plain, but with the entire experience in mind, saying like, hey, don't keep frustration in the center of your heart, in the center of your mind. Don't, let pain and destruction be something that you keep around your flesh, your very body. Like, treasure those things genuinely, like your peace of mind. And I won't say your physical comfort, because that means a lot of different things these days, but just don't hurt yourself, like, don't undermine the very source of your own life. Like, just keep those priorities properly ordered. I remember when I was young and I was having trouble finding a job, shortly after 2008, and, you're working someplace and you're trying to like prove your worth. And it was, very easily could have thrown my back out or done a bunch of stuff to mess up my body just to impress someone who was not even paying attention to me. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's a sense there of like wise perspective on youth. It tells you to, more than anything else, like, don't get caught up in overthinking and regret and those sorts of things. Just, make your decisions. Know that there will be consequences. Don't hurt yourself. Don't be dumb. Just everything that comes, you have to hold it with an open hand, and you'll be okay.
It sounds like the advice of an old person.
Right.
And that's not I'm trying to uphold that, not criticize it. But, old people's advice to young people is sometimes painfully simple.
Yeah.
And, well, what about this? And what about that? And you almost hear shades of like earlier bits of Qohelet, where she's like full in angst mode. Yeah, but it doesn't always work like this, and it doesn't always work like that. And I just see this journey in the course of this book where you go through all of that, but ultimately, like, this kind of advice, the bad advice that's born of like naivete and the like sage wisdom that is actually born of real experience, those can sound very similar.
Right. Yeah.
On the surface, but to be able to say, yeah, these things as plainly and, on the heels of the other 10 chapters. But I don't know. I mean, I haven't said anything for a few minutes. This whole passage has me like very emotional. Like I feel it deep in I'm not an old man, but I'm not a young man anymore either. I'm approaching my middle age, and I hear the voice of someone who is like lived a life and who is trying to help the people coming after them not live with a sense of like regret or even like with a sense of meaninglessness, which that's like the stereotypical image of Qohelet, right? Is the beginning. Everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless is the way that it sometimes gets translated. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's verse 8 talking about rejoice in the years that you have, but also recall. And that verb, recall the days of darkness. Mm-hmm. When you tell the story of your life, I don't know. We had a family reunion a couple weeks ago with my family, and we don't all get together very often. And my brother had taken the time ahead of the family reunion to go through family photo albums going all the way back to 1974 when my parents got married. And that was 10 years before I was born, and we just looked through these pictures, all of us sitting in the living room together. It's T.S. Eliot's like, there's a time for an evening by the lamplight with the photograph album. And like to recall both the days of good and the days of darkness, not so you can like, not so you can like be real, and just be like cool and real, but like, because there is something about the perspective looking back, like the whole thing is what your life is. And if there is an exhortation in here of like, you don't know the deeds of God who is doing everything from beginning to end, but there is a sense in this whole passage that is like a call to trust in God anyway, by living in this generous, wholehearted kind of way. And again, it's a younger man's game to try to parse out like how predestination works and does God do bad things and all these kinds of philosophical arguments that we get into, but just to say, like, recall the days of darkness too, because this is all a part of like what your life is. And I don't know, it's hard for me to like put it into words, but it hits me deep as we're just hearing these words. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm glad you brought it back to this. On a literary level, I think this is really, we've been talking about creation. We think about, day one, and everyone loves like, oh, let there be light. Oh, when there's light. Oh, how cool is that? But it's like, okay, well, what about before that? Like that was part of the same day. And even just, reconsidering verse 8, it says, remember the days of darkness, for they will be many, which I don't think Qohelet is saying to like undermine the rejoicing she's just told us to be consistent in, but rather, like, I think what you said was really perfect. Like, that is part of your life. Like, don't dishonor that part of your life. Like, there is kind of almost a self-betrayal. I mean, we see this all the time, right? Like, it makes me sick to my stomach. You go on social media and you see people who are like, trying to make their life like, oh, it's everything. Everything is all just good all the time. And, we all know that. And it doesn't even taste good, right? It's not actually that great. It's really only good if you are telling yourself while you're consuming like, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. Like if you actually just taste it, at some point you get sick of it. And I think we can even do that with our own lives when we are, again, obsessed with trying to figure out, the future, which another way of putting that is I always want to do the right thing, which, can only be determined if you know how things turn out, because things can go an infinite number of ways. If we're so focused on the future and how our life will go and doing the right thing, and in doing so, we filter out every bad decision we've ever made, or we say like, oh, that was the old me, or that, like, those are diminishments of our life, because it's all part of our story, and we should treasure all of that. Like that is not what actually undermines our joy. The whole story can still be wrapped up in joy, even with all the days of darkness, the same way that day one in the creation of light can sit side by side with those, dark waters beneath. Like those aren't the things that you should pluck out of yourself. It is the frustration, the little needle in your brain that keeps provoking you to be angry or to be upset. Like, that's the thing Qohelet says, yeah, like get that out of there. Don't have that anxiety and that angst and that frustration right in the center of your heart. Don't keep pain close to you like it's a part of your body. Like get that out. Like, you don't have a lot of this time, this childhood, this adolescence, this young adulthood. Like it's all going to pass away rather quickly. And that isn't to scare anyone or freak them out, but it kind of what I'm hearing from you, Reed, and also what I feel is that there's just like such a deep passion and reverence for the life that God gives us that is beating behind this. Like, no, like love all of it, the same way we would exhort you to love your partner. Like, love all of them. Don't just be like, well, I like this part of you, honey, but that part, I hate it. Gross. Get away from me. No, that's not how we do love to other people. I'm really glad I had you on this episode, because I knew we were going to get someplace profound and emotional. And unless you have something to say, Brent, we've got a fun little way to close this thing out. You got any thoughts for us? Any 3-pointers you want to put up at the last second?
Well, I don't know about a 3-pointer, but yeah, I mean, just to echo the ideas of like, this is emotional. It's also kind of encouraging, I guess.
Yeah.
In a weird way, like in a way that makes me feel like almost uncomfortable. But it's like, okay, if you heard me like saying everything's, silly and not worth anything, like, okay, but also take the time to enjoy it. I don't know. It's
yeah,
mixed emotions at this point, I guess. But yeah, I don't have anything.
Just being happy and positive all the time sucks. Like, that is not actually a way to like live your life.
Right.
That's not real. There's no contrast. There's no depth. There's, you know what I mean? Like, it's all just flat and vaguely pleasurable, I guess. But it's not good. And I think what Qohelet would say is like, real goodness actually involves light and darkness. It involves both of these days of joy and merriment, and also days of darkness. Like, recall it all, because at the end, like when you look back at the life that God has created and calls good, it's going to involve all of those things.
Yeah.
And so put away from your flesh like this worry that is like wishing it should have been otherwise, and being so resentful about what days of darkness have happened to you. And I'm not saying that like we should, this is not like the thank you sir, may I have another, like this is not self-flagellation. This is not that. That's not what I'm saying. So don't hear what I'm not saying, right?
We're not telling the children to stop complaining. Oh, just stop complaining. Like, no, there's
no, this is not that. This is not that. But it is to say, and I think this is just the wisdom of experience, and what those of us who, and it's not a knock to not have experience, you just haven't lived the life for it yet, and I'm just talking to my angsty 22-year-old self right now. But that like what God is creating in your whole life, and there is a deep mystery, and we should not try to flatten it out as to like what causes suffering and pain and how that interacts or intersects with what the will of God is. Like, I have stopped commenting on those things because we're talking about something that is too deep for me to know, or too mysterious. And yet, like, if what I want to lean into is that claim of faith that says like God is creating something that is good and has created something that is good, and when all is said and done, it will be said to have been good, then it's going to involve all of it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Don't try to make faith about some chucklehead version of Christianity where we're just like all blessed and happy go lucky like all the time. It's not that. That's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, the more I read this book, the more I'm like, man, this is so Bema. This is so Holy Spirit and Jesus. Like, wow, this is cool. But
isn't that amazing?
Speaking of the Holy Spirit, though, mid-episode, Reed had some sort of connection, like lightning somewhere in his brain.
Yeah. it just connected for me this poem by Rainer Maria Rilke from the Book of Hours, and it's called Go to the Limits of Your Longing. I think about this poem pretty regularly. I wrote a sermon based around this poem one time, so it feels appropriate to the spirit of Qohelet here in the 11th chapter. I was hoping that, Brent, you could do the reading.
God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame, and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. That does sound like a Reed sermon.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, honestly, you should. Reading this after you brought it up, I couldn't even put into words some of the connections there. I can see, and some of them run much deeper than I can see. And yeah, there's a lot of awe here in Qohelet, and I'm glad we got to begin unearthing it and feel the way it moves us. And I hope you out there listening also feel that, and that this, well, hopefully it sets you free.
All right, we leave our listeners in awe, whatever that awe takes them to. If it has anything to do with our podcast, you can find that at BamOnDiscipleship.com. But maybe not. I feel like there's a lot of options here. So, whatever you need to do, but get in touch with somebody, spend some time alone. Lots of ways to engage these thoughts, these emotions, these words. So thank you for joining us this week on the Bamon Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.